We are frequently conditioned to believe the international order stands on the precipice of a cataclysmic rupture. Yet, if we dissect the friction between sovereign actors, we discern not an impending fracture, but a sophisticated, perennial pulse of strategic endurance. Tonight, we analyze the game theory of attrition. We are deconstructing the Iranian geopolitical posture of hum har nahi mein, a doctrine of non-submission, against the United States' assertive policy of kinetic and economic escalation. By examining the Stuxnet cyber sabotage and the 2020 targeted strike on Qasem Soleimani, we can map the internal mechanics of hegemony and resistance. We must bypass inflammatory headlines to observe the mathematical choreography of two powers locked in a permanent, high-stakes orbit. In the Persian Gulf, the maritime environment appears deceptively tranquil as the solar arc terminates, leaving the illumination of offshore extraction platforms to perforate the darkness like industrial constellations. The framework of defiance is constructed upon a structural logic that bypasses simplistic binary narratives of victory and defeat. When we evaluate Iran's refusal to capitulate, we are observing the geopolitical inertia of institutional identity. This is not merely a diplomatic preference. It is a historical anchoring within a regional subsystem. Consider the War of the Tankers during the 1980s. Throughout this protracted maritime conflict, Iran sustained its vital hydrocarbon exports despite a comprehensive naval blockade. This era codified what analysts now define as the asymmetric blueprint. It catalyzed a statewide evolution in navigating subsurface vulnerabilities and identifying gaps within seemingly impenetrable containment walls. To quantify this resilience, we must prioritize the Bavar 373 surface-to-air missile system ***. This was not a product of expansionist intent, but a calculated indigenous response to global arms embargoes designed to render Iranian airspace vulnerable. The resistance economy doctrine ***. This represents a formalized internalizing of supply chains, a massive macroeconomic pivot to survive a multi-decade siege by transforming into a closed-loop system of production and consumption. The 2019 Global Hawk interdiction. This engagement served as a technical proof of concept, demonstrating a parity in high-altitude area denial, A2/AD, ***, that many Western intelligence agencies deemed improbable for a sanctioned middle power. This is not mere obstinacy. It is the physics of geopolitical mass. A landmass does not shift because its structural integrity is its primary strategic asset. The rigid, enduring geometry found in the ruins of Persepolis mirrors the logic gates of contemporary unmanned aerial vehicle (UAV) technology. The same ethos of permanence governs both the ancient stone and the modern silicon. While one actor derives strength from a mountain-like defensive posture, the other utilizes the gravitational pull of global hegemony. The American strategic calculus of hitting harder is not rhetorical posturing, but an assertion of kinetic supremacy. This is evidenced by Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, the largest U.S. surface engagement since World War II, a surgical tactical demonstration of a superpower's industrial military capacity. The variables fueling this gravity are mathematically significant. 1. The maximum pressure campaign. This clinical application of secondary sanctions targeted the rial's exchange rate, executing a form of currency warfare that destabilized the kinetic signaling. The deployment of B-52 Stratofortress task forces to Al-Udeid functions as a psychological deterrent, utilizing the physical presence of strategic bombers to exert pressure on regional adversaries. 3. The $800 billion defense appropriation. This budget acts as a geopolitical gravity well, an economic force so immense it necessitates that neighboring states align with its orbital path. If one could palpate the machinery of global commerce, they would detect the thermal energy generated by the friction where these competing interests intersect. It is a constant, oscillating warmth, the byproduct of two massive political entities navigating a zero-sum environment. As we advance our analysis, the cadence of the conflict shifts. We enter the Schwarzschild Radius of Diplomacy, the threshold where the gravitational pull of a negotiated settlement is most intense. The 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, represented a moment where the international community appeared poised to cross that event horizon into a stabilized era. However, the orbit expanded once more. To comprehend this, we must look at the clinical reality of the centrifuge cascade. Consider the 20% uranium enrichment threshold at the Fordow facility. Beyond the political rhetoric, the reality is the sterile, humming environment of a hardened enrichment hall. There is the ionization of air and the industrial scent of ozone. There is the literal weight of a diplomatic pen held over a multilateral treaty, a minute instrument capable of altering the entire spectrum of a nation's economic forecast. One can observe the cartographic shifts on the briefing maps and the tactile coldness of the negotiation table. It is a deliberate, procedural evolution, distinct from the kinetic heat of the literal combats during the 2024 Shadow War escalation. Both actors utilized these perceptual mirrors to satisfy domestic political requirements while meticulously avoiding the ignition of a regional conflagration. They employ proxy signaling across the Levant to communicate strategic intent without the existential risks inherent in direct state-to-state confrontation. It is the tactical equivalent of filtering signal from noise within a cluttered electromagnetic spectrum. By moving beyond the daily news cycles, we recognize that the high-decibel declarations of the morning are often merely shadows cast by the more complex, subsurface maneuvers of the night. We arrive finally at the geography of patience, a concept embodied by the Strait of Hormuz. This maritime choke point, only 21 miles wide at its narrowest, has witnessed the rise and dissolution of empires while its tidal patterns remain indifferent to sovereign titles. Key statistic: approximately 21 million barrels of petroleum, roughly 20% of global consumption, transit through this narrow corridor every 24 hours. It is the carotid artery of the global energy market. Beyond the raw data lies the topography of the Iranian plateau, vast, arid landscapes extending toward the interior, radiating thermal energy back into the atmosphere long after dusk. This terrain does not record the nomenclature of the empires that contest it. It only retains the structural memory of their logistical footprints and the eventual equilibrium that follows their departure. In international relations theory, this state is defined as a cold peace. In this paradigm, a stalemate is not a failure of diplomatic efforts, but the primary strategic objective. It is the sensation of navigating a vessel through a vast, stabilized ocean. There is no immediate landfall, yet the global order exists in this state of dynamic suspension, where the threats of escalation and the countermeasures of defiance provide the very tension required to maintain systemic stability. The narratives of history are stretching now, utilizing technical precision to describe a world that has learned to operate within the pressurized environment of a permanent standoff. This conflict is not a conflagration to be extinguished. It is a source of systemic thermal energy.